Good morning, everybody, and welcome again at our weekly Garden Shop online workshops. And yes, again, as always, I see all the old faces, all the old names. Welcome to all of you. I also see, again, a few new people here on my screen. So it's great to have all of you here. And I hope you're going to find today's section interesting and instructive. So without further ado, today we are talking about bulbs, and I think bulbs through the years is something that gardeners has treasured and that they find very interesting to grow, apart from the fact that the flowers from most bulbs are really beautiful and great looking. So I am going to switch to our PowerPoint presentation for today. If I can just get there. Good heavens, where is it now? Just got to have a look here quickly. It should be on the screen. Let me just try this again. Photoshop, show all windows. I think it's down at the bottom here somewhere. Aha, got it. Right, so I'm going to share the screen with you in a moment. We just get there. Right, and that is our PowerPoint for today. I think you've all got it on your screen now. Just going to minimize that. So as I say, today we are talking about bulbs and hopefully most of the things that you need to know about bulbs. Now the first question that comes to mind is, what is a bulb actually? And a bulb is actually not a root, it is actually a modified stem. So a modified stem has all the characteristics of the stem. And why did the plant modify the stem? It did so in order to store food for the plant, especially when the plant is dormant. Now, a lot of bulbs have actually sort of adapted over long periods of times in order to survive periods where it might be too dry, it might be too cold, or any other environmental factors that might sort of work against it. That's why if we have a look at our South African sort of bulb heritage, it is actually quite a big variety. And most of these bulbs actually come from the Western Cape and the Richtersveld and all those places where plants had to survive under very harsh conditions, and they would have to stay dormant for a long period of time. Now, we can divide bulbs in a few different types of bulbs, and the first one is a true bulb. Then we also get corms and tubers and rhizomes. So we're quickly going to have a look at what those differences are. Now, a true bulb is what we know of if you think of an onion, for instance. It's more or less rounded, it's sort of ball-like, and it usually has a narrow top at the a narrow bit at the top, and that's where the leaves would come out from. And then at the bottom, we've got what we call a basal plate, and that is the section where the roots would then emerge. Now, some true bulbs have a tunic, or some are without a tunic. A tunic is just like sort of a covering layer, a coat, as it were, over the bulbs. Now, true bulbs make new bulbs called offsets, and they make that from the basal plate. And then those offsets can actually be removed, and they will develop into bulbs themselves, or they could even stay attached to the mother bulb, and they will grow and make their own flowers. Now, the next one that we can think of is corms. Now, corms would be something like gladiolus bulbs. All corms usually have a tunic, and otherwise they have coat, and that coat can be sort of netted or it can be more solid. And it is a smoother sort of surface, and it doesn't have those distinct rings like an onion when you cut the onion through. In fact, the flesh that's inside the corm is actually sort of more a solid type of flesh. Corms also have a basal plate at the bottom and one or more growing points at the top. So some corms might shoot more than one sort of leaf set from the top of the corm. It is uniform, as I've said, and it's got no rings when you cut it, and the tissue inside it is solid. Now, again, corms could make baby corms, and those are called cormals, and they also usually form from the basal plate of the corm. Now, the next thing is tubers. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the famous old potato, which we can't go without. And the potato is, in fact, a tuber. So are very many other types of bulbs that we get that produces flowers. Now, tubers are very special types of bulbs. They don't have a coat or a tunic, and they don't have any basal plate. Instead, they have several eyes, sometimes at the top, sometimes like a potato, all around the plant. And those would be several growing points from which the plants would grow. Now, as you can see in that sketch below there, the roots actually develop through the tuber, the actual sort of shoot. The roots grow through the tuber, and that then grows into the soil. Now, with potatoes, say for instance, if you just remove one of those eyes on the tuber and place it separately, it should then grow into a new bulb again. The last one on our list is rhizomes, and I think that's also something that we are quite familiar with. Rhizomes you get in things like irises, even agapanthus and things like that. Now, rhizome is a stem that grows sideways instead of up, and it's got the nodes, and from those nodes it would develop roots from the bottom, and it would develop leaf tissue to the top. Ginger is a good example of rhizomes as well, and you can then eventually divide rhizomes as long as you've got a little bit of, as long as you basically have a node on it where roots and leaves could form from. Now, growing bulbs is a rewarding process. And a lot of bulbs, as I've said, has long periods of dormancy depending on which conditions they grow in. And it's for that reason why they've developed this underground stem. And you can get all sorts of bulbs. You can get bulbs that's like really tiny little things, and then you can get huge bulbs like your crinum lilies and those type of things that really grows big, and they've got fantastic big flowers. The planting time would sort of depend on the native time or where the bulb is native from, when the flowering time would be. So some bulbs grow best in winter and flower in spring. Others are frost sensitive, like dahlias, for instance, and those you would plant in spring so that they can grow in the summer and flower throughout the summer. Now, how do we grow bulbs? And how do we prepare to grow bulbs? First of all, you would probably go to your garden shop and you would find the bulbs. They're packaged in a little packet there, usually from a deco, and that packet would have all the planting instructions on it. And it would obviously vary from variety to variety. They're not all going to be the same. But what that instructions will tell you is when you need to plant it, when you can expect it to actually flower, what sort of light it needs to grow in. Is it a high light type of plant, or can it grow with less light? I'm thinking, say, dahlias, for instance, they need a lot of direct sunlight, whereas something like hyacinths can grow in high light areas. And it will actually also tell you how deep you must plant these bulbs, and it will give you all the instructions that you need. Now, some of you might want to plant the bulbs in containers, which is very beautiful. And if you also want to, you can plant those bulbs in your garden, and that's equally pretty. And usually, especially with the what we call the winter bulbs, which is actually spring flowering, you know, it sort of breaks, it really breaks into spring. In Europe, I mean, the coming of spring are signaled by the crocuses coming through the snow. But yes, you can use bulbs anywhere you like. One of my favorite things is to actually plant daffodils in my lawn, because you don't have to mow your lawn really in winter, and then just after winter all these beautiful yellow flowers come up on my lawn, and then once they finish flowering I can cut my lawn and my garden looks pretty enough. So you first of all need to look at the packaging and the season of planting. Now in the nurseries, people like Adiko, they usually swap the bulbs, so you won't really find packets of bulbs that you need to plant in spring for summer flowering in the winter, say, for instance. So whatever is on the floor at a professional garden shop, you would find that those bulbs would be suitable to plant when they are on the shelves. So we can basically divide it into two sort of main categories. And that is your bulbs that you plant now in winter or late autumn, and that would then flower in spring. And those type of bulbs, they usually like the cold, and the cold sort of stimulates their growth. And then you get the other types of bulbs, some of them which are cold sensitive, and those ones you would plant after the frost in spring, and they would then flower in summer and in early autumn. So the other thing that you need to consider when you are starting to plant bulbs is the depth at which you want to plant the bulbs. Different bulbs sort of grow at different depths, and it is usually the bulbs with taller, longer stems that would be planted deeper into the soil, because that would also prevent the flowers, like say gladioli, to fall over, because the little neck where it's like fitted to the bulb is not supported. So again, on your bulb packet, it should indicate you what the ideal depth is for planting those bulbs. Now let's start off by growing some bulbs in pots. And how do we do that? And I don't know why the screen is now all of a sudden not working. Yeah, you just put that there at the top. I've got a funny thing here now. My earth. Let me close that, see if that works. Aha, there we go. Right, so growing bulbs in pots. Let's start with container planting. Some bulbs are more suitable for containers than others. If you think of things with like sort of really vigorous, like rhizome type bulbs, those things are usually not that suitable for pots, but your smaller bulbs, your loose bulbs, your cords and those things are usually great for planting in pots. Hyacinths, daffodils, grape hyacinths, ranunculus, all of those things grow very, very well in pots. Now, what do we need if we want to plant bulbs in pots? And that is also quite easy. You first of all going to need a container, and you have to make sure that that container has proper drainage holes, because if your bulbs are going to be too wet, they are going to rot. You need a broken piece of pot shard or stones to cover the drainage hole so that the soil doesn't block the drainage hole. And then you need some bulbs that you want to plant, and you can plant a variety of bulbs in your pots. It doesn't have to be the same thing. And I'm going to go through the process where you actually plant it in layers so that, you know, every different type of bulb comes out and eventually make a whole display in your pot. Now, first of all, I think you're all quite familiar with this now. If you're planting in pots, you need to cover that drainage hole with either a piece of pot shard or some stones to prevent the drainage hole from getting blocked. So that is your first step. And then you're going to put in a layer of potting soil at the bottom of the pot, up to about 10 centimeters from the top of the plant, or from the top of where you're going to start inserting your bulbs. And then it's very easy. All you do is you start putting in your first layer of bulbs. Try to put the pointy end on at the top. For some bulbs, it's a bit difficult to distinguish which is up and down. The bulb would eventually, whether or not you plant it upside down or the right way up, would actually rectify itself and it would actually grow upwards. It might just take a little bit longer. And then you put in a few centimeters more of soil, and you then add some more bulbs on top of that. And you can sort of layer that up until your pot is full. And then you can just press down the soil nicely. And what I like to do is I like to put a bit of stones over my pot so that that sort of keeps the soil intact, because remember, there's no plants yet holding the soil. And then something before you put on the stones, you could also consider what we call overseeding. So if you want to sow some seeds of annuals, say for instance, you've got some daffodils in the pot, you might want to put some viola seeds or alyssum seeds or primula seeds. You sow that in before you put the little stones on top of your pot, and then you just water the whole lot well, keep it moist, and in no time you should start seeing the little buds emerging from your pot. Now, growing bulbs in the garden is equally easy, and it can be very rewarding, and I don't even lift the bulbs out of my garden when it changes season. You must remember, usually when you want to sort of split bulbs or things like that, then you would lift it, but bulbs naturally grow in natural environments where there's nobody and nothing to actually lift those bulbs out and store them for the season in which they're dormant. So they basically just stay underground, which is what I do in my garden. But if you want to, you can lift your bulbs and sort of hang them in a dry, cool area when they are dormant. Bulbs are also usually quite cheap, and especially once they start multiplying, then you don't have to worry about buying more bulbs. You can just like take those little formlets or offsets and plant additional bulbs. And that way, you know, you can create a great display in your garden without spending a fortune year after year. Now, first of all, if you want to plant bulbs in your garden, you've got to choose your flower bulbs. You've got to choose the bulbs that's correct for the season, first of all. And you can pick a variety of bulbs. You can interplant them. But look at the bulbs in the packet. Make sure that it's a nice, firm bulb, that it doesn't have any rot marks on it, and that it's not soft and moldy or anything like that. So those are the things that you need to look out for when you're buying your bulbs, and to make sure that you are actually buying healthy plants. Now, next of all, you need to prepare your soil where you want to plant your bulbs. And I think we've covered this in many of our workshops already as well. But firstly, you would dig over your soil, you would remove foreign objects like stones and weeds and things like that. And then you would put in a good layer of compost and some 315 fertilizer, mix that into the soil, and then level your bed. Now, how deep do I plant the bulbs? And that's going to depend on the specific plant. So that instructions you would find on your bulb packet, and you could also look it up on the internet. There's several guides as to the best planting depth for different types of bulbs. And then what you basically do is you make a little hole in the ground, you put the bulb into the right depth, and you cover it back up with your soil. You should always plant bulbs with the growing tips upwards. You know, a lot of people has actually come to me over the years and asked, oh, I don't know which side up I must plant the bulb. And as I said, look, it is beneficial to plant it the right side up, but with things like tulips and daffodils and things like that, you can actually see where the roots come from. So, you know, you would plant that with the roots facing down. Ranunculus, those you would plant with the little fingers towards the bottom, because the stem is going to come out at the top there where those little fingers sort of come together. But as I say, it's not the end of the world if you plant your bulbs upside down, inside out, or whatever. They will actually rectify themselves, and they will then eventually grow upward. Now, we do get some tools that makes it a bit easier for us to plant bulbs, and you get different types of bulb planters. And that's if you've got like a lot of bulbs that you've got to plant, you know, then this could just make your life a little bit easier. It sort of takes a bit of soil out of the ground. You put your bulb in and you place that soil back over again. It's quite handy if you're planting bulbs in your lawn, because then you just put that piece of lawn back on top there, and it looks like nothing has ever happened there. Now, the other thing that's also very handy when you want to plant bulbs is to, especially if you've got moles in your garden, because a lot of the bulbs, I'm thinking like dahlias and things like that, it's a very favorite food for moles, and they will eat all your bulbs while they're sitting there dormant under the ground. But there's a very easy way to actually sort of overcome that, and that's by planting your bulbs in what we call bulb baskets. You sink that into your soil, and the moles can then not get to your bulbs and eat them up. Now, the other thing that's quite sort of significant, and I actually had an email from somebody this week asking exactly about this. It's a thing that we get on bulbs, usually your amaryllis type.
Oh, yeah.
You get that.
Lily.
Somebody has got their microphone on. If you could just switch it off for me, please. The lily borers, usually you won't find that in winter, but those eggs will still be dormant in winter. And they usually get onto the clivias. They love getting onto the agapanthus. They like getting onto your crinums, your amaryllis, everything like that. And they can be devastating. And they ugly little critters, and they sort of bore into the core of the plant. And sometimes it becomes so mushy there that you actually get like maggoty type of things growing in there. It's like really terrible. And they can actually destroy the leaves of the plant too. They come out at night and they just multiply. They lay a lot of eggs. Eventually it's like a little moth that comes out of it. But it's definitely not something that you want to invade your bulbs. And as I say, specifically those bulbs that start growing in springtime, because these worms are dormant, or caterpillars say dormant in winter. Now, how do I get rid of these things? Well, I find the easiest way for me is to be proactive, and I just use a systemic insecticide early in the season. I spray my leaves with it, and I also, where possible, drench the soil with it so that the plant can actually absorb it. And then when those little caterpillars start hatching and chewing on your plant, they will easily and very quickly die, and that whole cycle would be broken. You might have to complete you might have to repeat the systemic insecticide maybe 2 months after your first application. And as I say, also try to spray into the core of the plant where possible. The other thing is to use a cypermethrin or a contact insecticide. That is going to be quite a bit more laborious, because you'll have to spray your plants every 2 weeks, and then again you need to spray into the core of the plant. You also get the Margaret Roberts biological insecticide specifically for lily borer, and what that does, it's actually like a bacteria that infects the worm, and then it can't it basically kills off the worms. Not always all of them, so you might still need to use something along with that in order to get rid of those lily borers. But when you see them, try and get rid of them as quickly as possible, because they can be quite devastating. Now, I've just prepared a short little video for you this morning, and I'm just going to plant some hyacinth bulbs into water. So here we go. Hi, I'm Sue. I'm your garden guru from Garden Shop, and today I'm going to show you how to make a very nice display for your coffee table or inside somewhere by just using some bulbs and pebbles and water. So what we've got here is we've got a nice glass container, and then I've got some pebbles that I'm going to use, and this is really so easy. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put some pebbles into our little glass container here, and let's fill it up this side as well, and you can really make a very nice little display for your house. And what's more is the hyacinths really smell wonderfully once they start flowering. Now I'm just flattening the pebbles a little bit like that, and then I've got my bulbs that I'm going to take out of the packet, and you will see there's the basal plate there where the roots would eventually come out, and then at the top there you can actually see where the leaves will grow out. So it's as easy as this. We're just going to press the bulbs halfway into our pebbles there. You can see the tips are still sticking out. There we go. That one's in. Let's put in another one. All like this, and now all that's left is for you to fill up your container up to the edge of the pebbles, or just a bit below it, with water. And the bulbs are very clever. They will soon smell the water, and the roots will start growing into the pebbles, anchoring the bulbs, and the leaves will soon come out. And I think it's about 2 to 3 months, and you'll have a lovely display of hyacinths on your coffee table. Thank you very much. I'm Sue. I'm your garden guru from Garden Shop, and you can follow us on our webpage, gardenshop.co.za, or you can also email me if you've got any questions, sueb@gardenshop.co.za. Well, that was just a little quick idea for you to work on your winter bulbs, or the bulbs that you're going to plant now. And just to let you know, the winter bulbs are not in yet. We are expecting them towards the end of March. So the first lot should start coming in by then. And yeah, you just give your local store a ring, and they will be able to tell you when they will have the bulbs in. Now, once you've planted your bulbs, it's also good to remember to feed them. Hadiko's got flower bulb food. You can use that, because you must remember that bulb now has to store the nutrients for the flower for this next season after the dormancy period. So like everything, the more you feed, the better it is for your plants. Now, I've got a very interesting story here for you today, which is related to bulbs. And some of you might have heard about the story. Well, it's not a story, it's an actual thing that happened. And that was called the tulip fever. And what is so amazing is tulips are such beautiful, beautiful bulbs. In fact, I must say that is actually my favorite flower by all means. And unfortunately, we can't even plant tulips in South Africa, because the tulip bulb needs to lay under like sort of very icy soil in order for it to actually stimulate the flower growth. So if you've got tulip bulbs, yes, you could plant them now. They will probably make leaves, but they will never flower because it's not cold enough in our winters for them to actually grow. There are places like at Hoxback and out there at Rhodes and whatever, where it actually gets cold enough for the bulbs to grow. But because it's so expensive to treat these bulbs, Hadiko has actually sort of stopped selling tulip bulbs altogether. Now, getting back to the tulip mania, this was a period during the golden age of gardening in the Dutch sort of colonies and everything. You must remember the Dutch economy at that time was probably, and I'm talking now late 1500s, early 1600s. It was the biggest sort of powerhouse on the on the known continent on the known continents at that time. They were merchants, and they had huge wheelings and dealings and tradings and everything with everybody and everyone. So what happened is somebody from Persia brought some tulip bulbs, and these tulip bulbs were so beautiful that they sort of became very high in price, and people were starting to speculate with these bulbs, and they actually used it to invest in things, and they also invested in the upcoming season's bulbs. And the tulip that actually sort of crazed this whole thing was a tulip called Semprus Augustus. Now, some of you might have seen this tulip, and I'm going to show you a picture a bit later on, because it had these like sort of candy stripe pink and white stripes in it, and that was really sought after. So all the growers really went in for it because they got very high prices. There was markets in Holland where it was just tulip bulb markets, and people were betting on bulbs. They used it for collateral, on loans, etc. So they really went crazy for these bulbs. And then something happened. This whole thing collapsed because all of a sudden these bulbs didn't grow anymore. And why? Because those tulips with the stripes in it, those very sought after tulips, actually were virus infected. And they couldn't flower anymore, and they couldn't make offspring anymore. And this virus, this tulip virus, it was thought for a long time that that was actually the first virus that was ever identified, but subsequently it now holds the place of the second virus ever discovered. And that is for humans, plants, and all of that. Now, this tulip breaking virus infects the bulb of the tulip. or the lily, and it changes the color of the petals. The change depends on the strain of the virus, the type of plant, and the age of when the plant actually gets infected. Now, the tulip breaking virus causes differences in the pigments in the flowers, thus you get those stripiness, which in turn then changes the colors. In lilies, it takes 2 weeks after infection to see a change in the color of the petals, and then it changes the shape of the leaves and the flowers. In all forms, the virus harms the bulb. It makes it more difficult for the plant to sprout again year after year. Eventually, the bulb is unable to ever flower again, which is why all those rare, what they call broken bulbs, because it's called a break, are no longer in existence. And actually, I don't think any tulip grower would want any of those bulbs even close to their healthy and natural looking tulips. Yeah, so that's just like a little bit on tulips. I thought I'd just put in that little bit of history for you just to make it a bit interesting. Some of you might have known the story, some of you not. There's a very lovely film too that you can try and get. It's called Tulip Fever. It's got a Judi Dench in it, I think, and yeah, it's a very lovely period film, and it actually shows you those flower markets where they used to bet on all these bulbs and how secretively all these growers were growing their bulbs. Now, again, it's our competition time, and last week we had up for grabs 3 beautiful terracotta pots from Flora Imports, of which one lucky winner is going to win it. And with me here, I've got Doris. Doris, do you want to move in a bit closer here? And I hope everybody can hear me. I'm trying to sort of, there you go.
Good morning, everyone.
And Doris is here again to be our independent judge and draw some lucky winner for us. Are you mixing it up, Doris?
Yes, I'm going to mix it up as usual.
Let's mix it up nicely. We don't want people saying that we're unfair. It's lovely to see all the entries coming in, and yes, everybody had it right. Oh, by the way, our question was, what are the 3 types of plants that you need to consider when you're planting mixed containers? And everybody had that right, but the answer was right there next to you too, and that's thrillers, spillers, and fillers. So let's see who the lucky winner is today. And our lucky winner this week is you better help me pronounce this. You are our lucky winner of those 3 beautiful, beautiful, beautiful pots. I'll be in contact with you and find out which is your closest store so that we can get this to you. Congratulations. Okay, and today we've got another competition. I'm really milking these suppliers of ours to give my participants in the workshops some good incentives for being here. And today we've got a lovely hamper from Hadico. It's got some winter bulbs in it, or bulbs that you can plant now, some peat if you want to plant them in pots, and also a winter planting guide for your bulbs. So that is up for grabs for next week, and we'll be doing the draw. And then our question for this week is, what bulb led to the collapse of the Dutch economy during the 1600s? What bulb, and you don't have to give me the name of this, just what type of plant caused this collapse of the Dutch economy during the 1600s? And you can email your answers to me, sueb@gardenshop.co.za, and you can then enter our competition. Remember, write your phone number down for me, as well as your closest store, which would be helpful. So before I finish off our presentation today. I just want to remind all of you that we are starting our gardeners course again, our new gardeners course again on, I think, the 4th of May. So anybody who wants to enroll, that will be at our Bryanston branch, and it will take place on a Tuesday morning from 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock until 12 o'clock. So if you're interested in that, please send me a mail and I can send all the details to you. And then we've also finalized the dates for our online course, which we're now going to be launching. And that is going to start at the end of this month on the 24th. Now, because the material is quite long to present over a 3-hour Zoom meeting, we've decided to rather do 2 sessions a week. In other words, we sort of split the modules up. So it will be 10 sessions spread over 5 weeks on a Wednesday and a Thursday morning. So for anyone interested in the online gardening course, you can also send me an email and I will give you all the details on that. Now, final word for today, and you know, all the kids think they grow up so quickly, and it happens for bulbs as well. And this little bulb is saying to his mother, "Mother, I'm almost 4 days old. Stop treating me like a bulb." Stop treating your bulbs like bulbs once they grow up. And that's all from me for today. And Doris.
Well done to everyone, and thank you for joining us. Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us for this meeting. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about what to do in your autumn garden and how to turn an autumn leaf. Autumn leaves being one of my favorite things, even my favorite song. And if you've got any questions in the meantime, there's my phone number there, or send me an email, suebi@gardenshop.co.za. And remember, we've got 3 stores with our qualified garden gurus at each store. At Broadacres, it's Lomzi, Parktown, it's Godfrey, and at Bryanston, Sibuyile. And if you've got any questions, those guys will be able to answer them for you. Until next week, stay safe and keep gardening.
That's right.